All you need is love. Da 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 da. That's the Beatles song. All you need is love. Does that make you mad, angry, frustrated, hopeless, despairing? That's what the world is all about, these romantic movies. And if you don't have it, don't you feel a little bit like there's something wrong with you? Maybe you went through a big breakup. Or maybe you've gone through a series of breakups and you're really tired of it because you feel like crap afterwards. You feel like nobody cares. Or you feel like you don't know how to choose the right kind of relationship. Or that love is simply not for you. Or maybe you lost the love of your life. The person who fulfilled you, that completed you. And now they're gone. And you just cannot get the energy up to start again. The idea of starting again, and then they might die. They might leave you. Why would you do that again? Why would you bother? I know the feeling. I went through it. After my first husband left me for another woman, I didn't want to feel the feelings. I felt discarded. I actually had a man waiting in the wings because I wanted to convince myself that I wasn't so terrible. But it was a limited relationship, and intentionally so, was sort of to keep me out of trouble. That is, if I just had one guy, maybe I wouldn't get diseases or whatever. Anyway, it was limited to once a week, and not deep conversations, not close bonding like I had had with my husband, because I didn't want to get hurt again. And then I joined a spiritual community where relationships did not matter. It was perfect. Spirituality is amazing because it really connects you with a bigger love. And it feels awesome and expansive and wonderful. And you forget about that human love. You forget about its importance. You feel superior. That kind of love is inferior. Of course, we live in these bodies, and I would get involved again. First time I got involved, it was my habit. I put everything into it. And he was a cinematographer, and he went off to do some movie work in South America. And he came back, and he didn't even call me when he got back. I met him on the street. I guess I should have thought there was something wrong. Anyway, I spent the night with him, and before we went to sleep, he said, I have something that I need to tell you. He said, I've met another woman and I've fallen in love with her. I probably should have gotten out of bed at that point and gone home, but it was 1 o'clock in the morning and it was winter, and I didn't. But I felt really crappy. And I went to my family and I cried and I cried and I cried. And I think I finally cried for the loss of my husband. I think it broke me open. I think that's the way that spirit works, is that when you don't let go, it keeps on pushing you until you let go. And so I cried. And then I went through more limited relationships because I was in the Sufi work, and that was more important. And it was unsatisfying. Those limited relationships. And I started to realize that I wanted more, that I got tired of being seen as unworthy or not enough. So I made a decision that I was not going to get involved again unless it was the real thing. And I wrote down my parameters. I wrote them down on a piece of paper saying what I wanted. And I put them in a box. And I went off to Sufi camp. And 2 weeks later, my husband showed up. The universe has a funny way. It just laughs at us all the time. So I dove into the relationship, and once again, he wanted to put limiters on it. He had come out of a relationship himself, and he felt like that he would throw himself into a relationship and then it would break up, and he would have lost contact with his friends. He would have just be totally disoriented. So he wanted to think of our relationship as lasting 1 year. I said, well, okay, as long as we dive deep, as long as we go deep. And he agreed to that. And so we kind of fumbled our way along for the first 6 months. And I kept on asking him, has that changed? Have you changed your mind on that? And he would say no. And I would find out, I would notice in myself that feeling of withdraw, pull away, of shut down my heart, reject the rejecter, because I felt rejected. And I realized that I needed to do some work. I needed to do healing, or I was going to really, really lose this relationship. And I wanted it to work. I guess we always want it to work. And so I did the work. And here's what I have found out. I found out as a PhD psychosocial analyst, I found out that there are 2 real reasons why you want to re-engage in love. One is the body. The body actually wants you to bond. I'm sorry, we are herd animals. We human beings are wired to connect with other human beings. It improves our chances of survival. So Mother Nature put a lot of mechanisms in these bodies to ensure that we will bond. And when we don't, it feels horrible. To be alone feels horrible. And so there's a compelling force to rebond. I had an associate whose marriage broke up after 5 years, and she was content to have that relationship break up. It wasn't working, but she didn't grieve. She did not release the emotions, and she went through relationship after relationship after relationship. I mean, some of them lasted like barely 2 weeks. That's how powerful this body is. It pushes you. So part of the journey is to navigate the emotional and biological forces of living in these bodies. The other reason, however, for re-engaging in love is a spiritual reason. I connected with that higher love in doing the spiritual work, that bigger, that more expansive, that ecstatic, wonderful, complete contentment, fulfilling. And that worked fine as long as I was at Sufi camp. And as soon as I left, the little mind would start whirling again. I remember, in the springtime, watching all the couples in the park and feeling crappy. Life is navigating those 2 things. There is the bigger love, and that is really the solution. But then there is this emotional body that needs to be dealt with. It needs to be healed. So here's also part of my psychosocial analyst understanding. When we lose somebody, the grief and the loss goes all the way back to childhood. The good news is that when you heal that, you heal everything. You make it possible for you to open to the larger love, which makes it possible for you to open to the intimate personal love. It's all part of a piece. So let's look at the early childhood wounds. Our parents are imperfect. We come into these bodies full of love. We are loving beings. We come from source. We are dependent on our parents for our survival. And oftentimes they have their own emotional wounds from their childhood. My mother, the daughter of an alcoholic and a cold mother. My father, his mother left and died when he was barely 10. And his father was ineffectual and unable to love. I mean, that was back in those days. Men didn't even know how to love. And so both of them were very tamped down. I mean, they wanted to love, but how do you know how to love if you've never been loved? So maybe you have a similar story. Your mother wasn't able to love you, or your father. And in my case, my father, he actually did love me. And then he was transferred when I was only 2, all the way to Japan. And in that time in which we were separated, I made the decision that I was not going to feel anymore, and that I was not going to let myself be vulnerable. And I developed a pattern of people pleasing. But I was not emotionally there. That's one of the reasons I'm sure that my first husband left me, was that I was not emotionally there. In fact, it's amazing that our relationship lasted as long as it did. I think it's because he didn't have an expectation of being loved because of his mother. And so it just goes back and back and back. But that doesn't mean that we can't stop the buck here, that we can't change. And not only can we change it, but we want to change it. We want to change it because it opens us to love, the divine love and the human love, by healing. So how do you heal? Number 1, you have to allow the emotions to travel through. These bodies are programmed to behave in certain ways. And once you understand how they work, it becomes easier to release those emotions. A lot of people do not want to face those emotions. They are scary. You think you are going to die, but you don't die when you have the support and you know how to release the emotions so you don't die. Number 2, you have to change the chatter in your head. The inner child who came up with the pattern for keeping you alive. She's got some ideas about how you need to be in order to survive. And whenever you try and change that pattern, she's got a direct phone line to your emotions, and she can turn on that fear in a second. Good news is you can release the fear just like you can release the grief. It's all emotional energy. And that's what I do with my clients. I help them release that emotional energy. I had a client who came to me. She was struggling with the loss of her husband. He left her after 30 years. She was devastated. And of course, there was all this emotional wounding as a child of not knowing how, not having a model for what a positive relationship looks like. And actually, the relationship she had with her husband was way better than anything she had as a child. So of course she was staying in there trying for all she was worth to make it last. And then when it let go, it was her biggest transformational time. The trick is to trust that everything is happening for a reason. That's the spiritual side, connecting with spirit and trusting spirit, that spirit's got our back and that it is moving us towards where we need to be. And here's another part of it. The struggles that we have as children actually give us our gifts. the tools that we are going to need in our life's work. It's almost like we chose our parents in order to get these gifts. They are awarenesses, healing power, sensitivities that enable us to help others. So, for example, when I tamped down my emotions, I couldn't have helped anybody. It was only in coming back to my emotions and my feelings that I was able to start to help other people. And here's what I learned. The fact is, the reality is that I am super sensitive, which is the reason why I tamped down my emotions a long time ago. It was because it was too overwhelming. I couldn't take my feelings. They were too scary. They were too threatening. However, in learning to heal myself, I've been given tools that enable me to heal other people, to bring them back to love. To be able to feel what the other person is going through, and to give them the practices that will help them to break through what's holding them back. To be able to see their whole life circumstance in a different way so that they can heal, so that they can step fully into their power and ultimately their purpose. So why do you want to heal? Why do you want to go back to love? You want to go back to love because that's what we're here for. That's your purpose. You cannot fulfill your purpose until you embrace love again. Take that in a moment. You need to embrace love. You need to love yourself. When we're children, we put on masks to protect ourselves. We put on shields to protect ourselves. We are not who we are truly meant to be. We hide because we are afraid. The biggest fears, there are two big fears. The two big fears are, one, death. So as a child, we do a lot of things in order to survive. We are afraid that we might die. Number two is being alone. We're social beings. Remember, I told you that. So if we, oh, hi, welcome. I'm talking about why you would want to have love in your life. So there is the, now I've lost my train of thought. There is wanting to survive. Okay, the two fears are survival, and the other fear is, thank you, the other fear is being alone. We're social beings. We don't want to be alone. It's scary to be alone. The body doesn't want to be alone. The body certainly does not want to die. It's got mechanisms like crazy inside that try and prevent you from dying or being alone. But the solution is spirit. The ultimate solution is connecting to your true authentic self. And the only way to do that is to heal all the blocks that get in the way of being yourself. And that means doing the early childhood healing. To allow the feelings to change the story, to step into your power, which is scary. It's scary to do that. I understand. So if you would like to know more about the work that I do, if this resonates with you, if you would like to reclaim love in your life, and you know, when you reclaim love, you have enough to go around. You don't feel lonely. You feel complete. And then you attract everything that you need. So if you want a conversation, there is a link in the comments section. You can schedule a 15-20 minute conversation with me to find out how I work, find out if we are if we are a match. We are here for a reason. There is a purpose. And the number one fear, not the number one fear, the number one regret of the dying is not having lived a life true to yourself. Take that in. You can continue, no matter how old you are, to work on that purpose until your last breath. You have a purpose. I know. Oh, I'm too old. You are never too old for love. It may not be love in the form that you think or imagine on the romantic movies, but you can bring love into your life. And when you are full of love, you can impact others. And that is ultimately what we're here for. To be of benefit to other people, to be of service. That is also wired in, not only in the body, but in our spirit as well. That's my talk for today. If you want a conversation, schedule a talk, schedule a phone call. That's it for now. Be brilliant, and until next time.